Hello everybody, you're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. This is the weekly radio show where we chat about the local arts news. We have a different guest on each week. We head over to the Rhylight Zone for a short story and or some poetry. And we catch up with Twangling Jack Ford over in the Ilkshed for a weekly album review. As always, you can find us on Facebook. If you search for The Art Show on Wickham Sound, you should be able to find us. And we are repeated on Wickham Sound on Monday nights. We're on the Wickham Sound Listen Again, iTunes, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please do leave us a short review on your podcast platform of choice. So this week, you can also email me here at the studio on dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain @wickhamsound.org.uk. And I'm particularly keen to hear from poets, performers, musicians, anybody with MP3s to share, anybody who would like to come on the show. Please do get in touch. So this week we're going to be chatting to songwriter Heather Innes, but before we do that, we're going to head over to the Rhylight Zone for the latest instalment of The Crumb by myself, Dane Cobain.
Let's get out of here, Red said. You got my vote. Agreed. We can't, Caroline said, pointing back in the direction they'd come from. With no flashlight, she'd resorted to using the light from her phone to illuminate the way, and the beam showed that the steel door had swung closed, locking them into the annex. We're trapped in here. That's not strictly true, Marlon replied, pointing his own flashlight first towards the door and then back into the darkness they'd been facing. There's a tunnel that leads to the courthouse. Back when the Crumb was operational, they used it to transport the criminals from the courthouse to the jail and back again. Cobain Leon. Tatugo Lea Chumbaza Felancio. Cobain Leon. Do you know where it is? Caroline asked. Of course, Marlon replied. It's my job to know where it is. Then lead the way. Marlon did so, and the ghost hunters followed. The spirit boxes continued to chatter, their voices building to a crescendo until they were suddenly silenced as the party passed through an empty doorway and then down a flight of stairs which led into the basement. As the spirit boxes died out, so too did the torches and the EMF readers. Even Caroline's phone went dead, leaving them stranded in the darkness. I thought this might happen, Marlon said. This is the dead zone. Nothing works in here. Just be careful as we go down the steps. They're uneven and can be slippery at times. Is it safe? Red asked. Not really, Marlon replied, but what choice do we have? The descent seemed to take an age, even with a hand in her brother's arm, and Caroline was relieved to feel solid ground beneath her feet again on the other side. She glanced down at her phone, which was showing the Apple logo on the screen as it turned back on again. The shuffling of feet and the muffled curses of the ghost hunters was broken by the sound of laughter, seeming to come from back in the direction they'd come from. One by one, the ghost hunters flicked the switches on their torches until they came back on again, and then they shone them around themselves in meandering arcs as they sought the source. Ghosts again, Harry murmured, his tone of voice ambiguous so that it wasn't clear whether it was an observation or a question. Isabel, Marlon said. We see her from time to time, often playing with the boy with no name. There are kids here. You sound shocked, Marlon replied, turning to look at the ghost hunter who'd asked the question. This place was built from sadness and grief. It opened in the 1840s, and back then it wasn't just for men. They incarcerated women and children here too. What for? Debt, Marlon said, amongst other things. Does Isabel pose as a threat? Oh no, Marlon replied, at least not as much of a threat as the others do. No, Isabella and her nameless friend just like to cause a little mischief and to make their presence known. We've had a few reports of her showing up in the photos that people take when they come to visit us. I saw one of them on TripAdvisor, Caroline said. It looks super fake. I thought it had been made with AI. I assure you, the photos of Isabel are very real, Marlon replied. Trust me, I wish they weren't. This is no place for a child. Isabel laughed again, but the party had continued to venture deeper into the basement, and she sounded further away, as though the veil of death had descended once more to silence her. What about the photos of the jailer? Red asked. I read about those in the Mirror. Were they real? Don't believe everything you read in the Mirror, Caroline murmured. Oh, yes, Marlon said. That was taken by one of the hunters on last year's Halloween tour. I can't tell you the jailer's name, but there have been stories about a phantom prison warden going about his rounds for as long as I can remember. It said that... Watch your step. Thank you, Harry, Marlon replied. Yes, carefully, everyone. We're about to enter the drop cell and the floor's a little uneven here. What were you saying about the warden? Ah, yes, Marlon replied. That photo you saw in the Mirror was of him standing outside the padded cell in B-Wing. Some of our visitors have reported seeing a darkness in that cell, while others claim to have been touched, pinched, scratched or shoved. Has it ever happened to you? No, but I'm not dumb enough to go inside, Marlon said. That cell was for the deranged and the mentally ill. Often those who were ushered in were never taken back out again, except for inside a casket or a body bag. It's a dark, disturbing room, the second most evil inside the complex. Which one comes first? Caroline asked, fearing as she did so that she already knew the answer. It didn't take long for her suspicions to be confirmed. Marlon didn't say a word. He merely nodded in the direction of the room they were about to enter. It was the basement drop cell, a room slightly larger than the regular cells and with an entrance on the opposite side of the chamber. A series of rusted iron railings was stretched across the other entrance, though there was a gate built into them which was hanging open. All remnants of the cell's former sinister purpose had been stripped away, all except for the length of rope that was tied into a noose and which lay in a heap on the floor. Holy f***. What is it, sis? Don't you see it? See what? Oh, weird. Never mind. If the noose had ever been there, it had disappeared once more into the darkness, though a rope-shaped shadow remained. It was as though the cell itself remembered its former horrific purpose. This place gives me the creeps, Red said. Let's get out of here. Sure thing, Marlon said. There's not far to go now. We just need to pass through the iron gates and along the path, and it'll take us through to the courthouse. You guys go first. I'll bring up the rear. Why? Harry asked. Are we likely to be attacked? Let's just say that the Grey Man is known to haunt the tunnel, Marlon said. Don't worry, he won't hurt you, or at least he hasn't hurt anyone yet. Very reassuring. Come on, our kid, Caroline said. It's 5 to 2. Our Uber will be waiting for us soon, and I don't want the driver to give me a bad rating. And I don't want to die down here and become another ghost, Harry murmured, but he fell into line behind his sister, who was leading the way. I can't believe people put on concerts and get married here. Who wouldn't want a spooky wedding? Me, Caroline, Harry said. Wedding crashes are bad enough when they're alive. Imagine what it would be like if they were dead. We've got 2 more minutes, Caroline said. We'd better get a move on. I think I can see some light at the end of the tunnel. The light in question turned out to be a security light in the courthouse. It seemed as though ghost hunters finding their way out through the courthouse was a common occurrence, because someone had put some signs up directing them to the exit, and the doors at the end of the corridor were unlocked from the inside, although they locked themselves automatically after the last of the ghost hunters let the door swing closed behind them. And just like that, they were standing outside the entrance to the courthouse, just over the road from the main entrance to the Crumb. The cold air washed over them, and Caroline rubbed her arms and shivered as she felt goosebumps rising and her hair standing on end. Ah, there you are. The tourist turned to look in the direction of the voice, which belonged to a young man in an anorak who was standing on the other side of the road. I've been waiting, the man said. You're late. Late for what? It's 10:10, the guy replied. I thought you weren't going to show. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, Caroline insisted, pulling out her phone to prove her point. Her mouth dropped open. It's definitely 10:10, the man said. I'm so confused, Harry replied. He held his wrist up to Caroline so that she could see it, and for a moment she thought it was 10 to 2. Then her heart dropped as far as her mouth did as she saw which way around the hands were. It doesn't make sense. We were in there for hours. I checked the time a minute ago, and it definitely wasn't 10:10. The other ghost hunters seemed just as confused as she was, as did the man who'd admonished them for being late. There was a babble of conversation as everyone tried to talk at once. Caroline took the opportunity to look back to spot their guide and to ask him for his input, but he was nowhere to be seen. Meanwhile, the man in front of them had pushed his fingers into his mouth and blown out a shrill whistle that tore the night in half and hushed the ghost hunters into a reluctant silence. Quiet, please, he said. We're already running late, so let's get the show on the road, shall we? My name is Marlon, and I'll be your tour guide today. Welcome to Crumlin Road Jail. I hope you enjoy your visit.
That was the latest instalment of The Crumb by myself, Dane Cobain. You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound, and this is Trangling Jack Ford with a new tune about Elon Musk called Space Karen.
Not the masterpiece, Space Karen, you're just not that popular. Your people want strike, Space Karen, to use the parasite, Space Karen. People will divide, Space Karen, but we can see what you are. Space Karen, we will go the extra mile, Space Karen. Without you ain't got
I'm a viral cat playing in the snow, not a feral puss, I'll have you know, and I'm world famous. They took my picture the other day, when most cats were afraid to go out and play, covered from my tail to my eyes in that cold, white stuff from the sky. I'm a viral cat playing in the snow, not a feral puss, I'll have you know, and I'm world famous. I was posted on Facebook that very night, my poor Bitsy, they said. They laughed out loud at my furry plight, so cute, so classic, oh what a sight. I'm a viral cat playing in the snow, not a feral puss, I'll have you know, and I'm world famous. Well, your poor Bitsy's gone viral to cat lovers in US and Oz. But there's one thing I want you all to know, this is not my first time in the snow. I'm a viral cat playing in the snow, not a feral puss, I'll have you know, and I'm world famous. I'm no kitten though I look sweet, I'm your Christmas card image, what a treat. I'm 9 years old and that's a fact, with all my 9 lives intact. I'm a viral cat playing in the snow, not a feral puss, I'll have you know, and I'm world famous. I'm a viral cat playing in the snow, not a feral puss, I'll have you know, and I'm world famous. 50 likes on one page alone.
That was Bitsy's Gone Viral by Heather Innes, and before that we had Space Karen by Twangling Jack Ford. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and it's time for us to be joined now in conversation by this week's guest, who is Heather Innes. Okay, awesome. Well, the first question is a generic question I ask everybody. You may or may not have an answer to this. We'll see how we get on. It's what was the last book that you read, and what did you think of it?
Oh, okay. I'm reading a Barbara Cartland at the moment.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. No, sorry, not reading Barbara Cartland. What am I talking about? Barbara Erskine. I'm not,
Right.
not Barbara Cartland person. Barbara Erskine. Time's Legacy. It's just
Yep.
kind of about supernatural and stuff, ghosts
Cool.
and things like that.
And how is it so far?
It's great, actually. It's very good. Yeah, it's working on the fact that Jesus came to Glastonbury.
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
yes, studying with the Druids, that kind of thing. Yeah, and it's going back into those times,
Yeah.
along with somebody in modern day times, accessing the previous life.
Yeah.
Or went through a crystal or something. It's
Cool.
crazy. It's crazy, but it's good. But it's good. It kind of looks at the whole hypocrisy really of mainline churches,
Yeah.
and and being open to other spiritual thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, obviously today I mostly want to chat to you about your songwriting, and I thought
So
the perfect place to start is to ask how long have you been writing songs, and how did you get started?
uh, yeah, I'm sorry, but I don't really class myself as a songwriter, to be honest. But
Yeah.
years and years ago, I think the first, the first one that would have been Rannoch, and that was I was in a concert listening to I can't remember the names now, but honestly, I'm getting old and I forget things. I forget people's names, but oh gosh. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Oh, Steve Tilson and Maggie
Yeah.
Boyle. I thought who it was years ago when I was on the road solo, and went to one of their concerts, and they were talking about a special place that well, she was actually a special place she'd been to, and he wrote the song about it. And
Hmm.
I thought, well, I've got a special place like that. I can write a song about Rannoch. So I went away and worked away on I wrote kind of like a poem first, and I came up with a chorus for it, and I had a guitar back then. I don't use the guitar very often now, but I worked on a few chords, and yeah, and that's how Rannoch started. So that was the first song really. And Fellside Records, when I did a recording with them, they liked it. They put it on. So on that recording, yeah, that was the beginning of it. But Mostly I sing other people's songs
Mm-hmm.
or trad songs, but during the pandemic or during the lockdown in particular, I kept wait. I'd written just some very small poems and things.
Mm-hmm.
But I just decided I woke up one night with a tune going through my head for the chorus. That was from my grandma's song one. And I thought, oh, so I used the phone and recorded the tune while I could think about it. It was the middle of the night. Went
Mm-hmm.
back to sleep again. The next morning, I went back to it and wrote the song. The whole song came to me that day. That was that one. The one about my dad, a guy called Eamon Friel, who or the late Eamon Friel now, whose concert I went to in Northern Ireland before the
Mm-hmm.
lockdown. Yeah, I listened to a beautiful album of his, and one of his songs was about his father, and I thought, oh, I really could. I've got things I could say about my dad,
Yeah.
and it's kind of cathartic, really. And so I wrote that one back then, but I didn't do anything much with it. I sang it out at an open mic,
Mm-hmm.
and I was told it was okay. So I thought, okay, all right then, So yeah. So anyway, during the lockdown, I decided to put these all together. That one and also the was it Finding My Song, which I also wrote in Rostrevor when I was living in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I can't think what else. I think Mother Teresa I wrote actually during the lockdown. Um, yeah. Anyway, I decided to put them all together on an album, but of course, how do I do that? I can't get to a recording studio. I'm
Mm-hmm.
actually, I'm in lockdown here. But I got in touch with Red Band Studios, who I've always gone to, was both with my band and also my solo work in Scotland. And Stuart said that I could actually put them I could actually record them on my phone, and he would be able to bring them up to CD standard.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we did.
Oh,
And there you go.
amazing.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing what you can do when you when you can't get when you have to go where you have to be. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, cool. And
Yeah.
you mentioned obviously you said that you don't consider yourself a songwriter. How would you describe
Mhm.
yourself? And we can go broader into what you do in life in general if you want as well.
No, no, I'm a singer, but um, singing from the heart, really.
Hmm.
Whenever I sing, whatever songs I sing, I like to get right into them, right into the
Yeah.
heart of them, and share them with an audience that way. Um, Yeah, I'm mainly an a cappella singer. I know I've been in
Hmm.
bands, and that's not always been the best idea for me,
Yeah.
except working with Came. That was different, because we were doing a cappella a lot anyway. Myself and Jasmine were a duo for God, I don't know, nearly on 30 years singing
Hmm.
a cappella, but a cappella harmony, which is great,
Hmm.
because she had a really high voice and I had low, and then in came Pauline because Jasmine was ill. Um, and Pauline stood in for Jacinth when she was ill. She had heart surgery, and Pauline, we decided to keep her because I mean she added in the harp
Yeah.
and the flute, and that was great. I mean that worked well with our a cappella singing, so we then became a three piece. Um, well, why did I get onto that? But anyway, but then Jacinth has always been my friend Jacinth and came. She's known me since the Belfast days when I first started singing,
Hmm.
and she's always encouraged me to sing solo, to sing a cappella, which I did do in the first 6 years of my full time singing back in the
Hmm.
'90s. And I hadn't done for years. I've been giving away my singing to bands, and it
Yeah.
was okay. But anyway, um, and I think coming to New Zealand, I've kind of had to. I mean, okay, I
Yeah.
could go looking for a musician to work with, but I think I'm meant to just do what I'm doing now and sing a cappella.
Hmm.
And there's a freedom in that because I can choose what I sing. I can choose how to work the audience, how to work with the with not work with, but work with an audience.
Hmm.
I can choose to sing from my heart, to
Yeah.
share, and that's what I choose to do.
Yeah.
I had a great gig sort of recently in Wellington, the Acoustic Roots Folk Club in Wellington. I was actually a sport act there. I only had 20 minutes to do, but
Yeah.
Um, it was great. I mean, I couldn't believe how I just basically sang and sang from my heart
Yeah.
and enjoyed the audience. I mean, they were great. There was some they were amazing. They sang harmonies. They did everything
Mm.
with
Yeah.
me, in choruses. And that's the kind of thing. That's how I like to be
Yeah.
now. I'm a solo singer.
Well,
Yeah,
and I suppose it
yeah,
goes back to the history of what songs were when they, back when we first as a species started singing. And
yeah,
also, you mentioned sort of some of the like the traditional songs, things like that, which again, most of those were just sort of sung by groups of people. Maybe somebody
yeah.
might play a bit of piano or something. But I wondered as well, you mentioned singing from the heart. So how do you balance, again, singing from the heart and speaking your truth with maybe singing traditional songs that, you know, people have been singing for decades? How do you make sure that it still comes from the heart even when it's a traditional song?
Get inside the story.
Yeah, makes
You
sense.
know, yeah. I mean, you're sharing a story. You're sharing someone else's story, so it's got to be a story I like or I believe in for me to sing it. To be honest,
Yeah.
I can't sing something I'm not happy about singing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I suppose like, and maybe, would you agree with this that like a good story is kind of, A, it's kind of universal, but B, you can kind of, different people can draw different meanings. So, you might sing a song that means one thing to you and somebody in the audience might listen to it and it might move them, but for a completely different reason.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. And also one thing I learned a long time ago, I still have trouble with it, but if you watch the audience too much and watch the expressions on their faces, you've no idea what they're thinking or where they're
Mm,
going with your song. And you can start thinking, oh, they don't like my song, and that might not be it at all.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
And you again by singing a cappella, and we talked about again the stories. Do you think a cappella songs or any song sang a cappella by its nature, does that kind of force people to listen more to the story? Because obviously any instruments or whatever that might cloud the lyrics a bit, they're all kind of stripped away, and all you've got is the melody and the lyrics.
I think you're right. Yeah, it's a form of storytelling in song, really. That's what it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I do play the bodhrán, but
Hmm.
that's for a beat, though. That doesn't take away. I don't think. I mean, yeah, it's a beat. I also have a shuchi box. I sometimes put a drone underneath
Hmm.
something to give it a bit more depth,
Yeah.
but not that often with the shuchi box. I must admit, there's not a lot not a lot of songs you can continue the one drone on the same note. I mean, you can't change the drone once it started. So
Hmm.
it was different when I was singing in the duo with Jason. She could drone, but she could actually change. Obviously
Yeah.
she's got a
Yeah.
voice, so she's doing vocal, so she can
Yeah.
change the vocal pitch of the drone. But you can't do that with the Shutry box. But the baran, yeah, the beat, yeah. But I'm a very basic baran player for that reason. I play jigs and reels. I can play in sessions to a certain extent. But if you get a good baran player coming along, I just let them get on with it because I'm
Yeah.
not I'm not one of them. I'm good, but I'm not complicated in my playing because
Hmm.
I've always played the baran to go with my singing.
Yeah.
So it doesn't. I'm trying to, for just that very reason, not take away from for the vocals.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just to give a beat. Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes.
You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain. I'm here in conversation with Heather Inners, and this is Heather Inners with War Scars.
Couldn't understand why we moved around so much, why I had 9 schools in my youth. I was born since that war, so how could I know why you found it so hard to face the truth? Dunkirk, the Middle East, were memories buried deep. You refused to talk about that war you'd been through. Instead you found your peace, fishing lonely lochs and streams, or tending plants in each garden that you grew. Hoping the grass was greener, you moved our family on, seeking peace beyond each horizon new. You became a traveling salesman to keep those demons at bay until retirement and your dreams you could pursue. Dunkirk, the Middle East, were memories buried deep. You refused to talk about that war you'd been through. Instead you found your peace, fishing lonely lochs and streams, or tending plants in each garden that you grew. You couldn't share your feelings buried deep within, finding fault, something to blame in each new place. The bright Australian sun, dog poo on the streets, your reasons became more crazy to embrace. Dunkirk, the Middle East, where memories buried deep. You refused to talk about that war you'd been through. Instead you found your peace, fishing lonely lochs and streams, or tending plant in each garden that you grew. You believed in that war, they said you came home unscathed, but peace was an illusion you couldn't embrace. They were wrong, you lost your life, fighting for their empire, forever running from horrors you had to face. Dunkirk, the Middle East, where memories buried deep. You refused to talk about that war you'd been through. Instead you found your peace, fishing lonely lochs and streams, or tending plants in each garden that you grew. Dunkirk, the Middle East, where memories buried deep. You refused to talk about that war you'd been through. Instead you found your peace, fishing lonely lochs and streams, or tending plants in each garden that you grew.
That was War Scars by Heather Inners. You're listening to the Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain. And it's time for us to be rejoined in conversation now by Heather Inners. Cool. And I'd love to know a bit more about like the process of when you were writing your songs over lockdown. I mean, did you have a lyrics notebook? You mentioned you recorded it on your phone as well. Like what does the process look like? And also, would you come up with like lyrics first? I suppose in some of them you did when they started more as poems, or is it, lyrics and melody at the same time, melody first, or does it really depend for you?
Let's take Grandma's song for instance. I mean, I had the story of my grandma's house in my first in a memoirs book I wrote called New Beginnings, and that was there for a whole chapter. And I came up with the lyrics to the chorus in the middle of the night and wrote that down. I have a book beside my bed always, so I can write stuff down. And then of course, as I told you about the melody, so I recorded that on the phone, and then the next day, of course, I had the melody and I had the chorus. So then I started working on the verses. From what I knew. I mean, obviously, it was my story. It was my story of being at my grandma's house when I was young. So it was my story. So I was able to do that.
Yeah. And did you have to often revisit your lyrics and edit them or anything like that, or was it a case of once you'd written them, they were pretty much there?
Pretty much there. I do with poetry and with anyway. I always, you're supposed to really leave things and then come back to them. So you can see if there's anything that needs editing. But it didn't happen quite so much with the songs right enough, I suppose, because I don't know. Of course, we'll work into a melody or something. Well, certainly when I'm writing, I do poetry as well, and I've got a Facebook thing called Heather Gems with my poems on it, and I've printed some of them off. With those, I do go back. I'm a bit impatient though. I mean, if I think something's right the first time, I'll just do it. I just put it out there. I sometimes regret it and have to go back and change a bit or something. But mostly, it's the first time okay. It's first draft usually okay. Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned there as well, like you performed at open mics and things like that. I suppose that's a good way to almost road test, and like you say, maybe where you've posted something and then maybe later regretted it, but you wouldn't have known that if you hadn't posted it. And I suppose maybe it's the same with going and the first time you sing a song in front of somebody, you know whether it's working or not, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, the one about my father, War Scars, that was particularly, I mean, I was living in Northern Ireland at the time amongst lots of musicians and songwriters and goodness knows what, it was, could be intimidating. And I got up at this open mic in Ancuin. There was a centre down on the shore there in Ross River, and I was reading the words because I hadn't learnt them at the time. I just read it. I read the words and sang them. And I really was. I took it was brave. I took a risk because I really wasn't sure if I got it, if it was a good song or not.
Yeah.
And there was people afterwards that came and spoke to me about it. people that had been touched by it, or that they'd had a similar experience with their fathers through the war or
Hmm.
whatever. But yeah, I got some good feedback, and that's what gave me the courage to go ahead with it.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. And you mentioned there sort of your background in Ireland. You've been in Scotland. You're now in New Zealand. Can you tell us a little bit about your sort of travels around the world and what it's been like for you to experience so many different places?
Oh, for goodness. When I was a child, I hated it. My father, it was part of his thing. I mean, he was, as the song would say, he was in the Second World War. Um, they were told not to talk about it when they came out.
Hmm.
They couldn't. So when they had PTSD, they didn't know that, understood that back
Yeah.
then. His way of coping with that was to keep traveling, keep moving on.
Yeah.
But his moving on was always, there's something wrong with the place he was in. He was going somewhere else.
Yeah.
And of course, we had to go with him. It's just my mum and me. Um, and I really hated it. I mean, at one point when we were in Australia, I told them I wanted. I was, in fact, one time I was in Scotland. I was 15,
Yeah.
and I wasn't quite old enough to be adopted by somebody else. But
Mm.
some friends of mine were going to actually stop me going and keep me there.
Yeah.
I was quite happy for that. But anyway, I'm glad that didn't happen. So that was then. But it set me up though, really. When I grew up, obviously, and when I started singing and traveling. Um, first of all, it was usually singing and traveling. We go on the road, but you come back to where you were living. So you're going out, but you come back home again
Hmm.
to each home. That was good. Um, but I was kind of used to travel. I was used to different places. Um, as for me moving on, everywhere I moved from, God, different reasons each time. I was actually 10 years in one place when I was married.
Yeah.
Then my husband died, and we were on a farm, and I had to move because I couldn't maintain the farm, but on my own. And I moved into a nearby village. Um, I don't know what. Yeah, I just there's been different reasons. Those personal reasons before that why I moved away. My
Hmm.
parents were. My dad had dementia in his old age, and they were who was taking strokes, and my mum was blind, and they refused to get help.
Mm.
And um, the carers in the area told me that I had to move
Yeah.
because they wanted me out of the way so they could care for my parents professionally.
Yeah.
So that was my move to England from Scotland that time. I could, I don't know. I've just had lots and lots of places I've lived in, but
Yeah.
I think it's really I think it's added to my life experience.
Hmm.
Um, I was born in Africa, but I don't remember that. I was only a child, and I have regretted not being able to go back there and see where I was
Mm.
born. That's the one regret I've got. Scotland, I love. Scotland is my dad's heritage and it's mine. Um, England was just the place that I was in England a couple of times. When I was there the last time during the lockdown, it was very near where my grandma used to live. I know I was in Derbyshire, but Sheffield was just up the road
Hmm.
for me. Um, Australia, that was my parents taking me to Australia the two times. Um, I was never dreamt of going back to the UK from Australia, except for a visit.
Yeah.
We all, when you were in Australia, you always went back either to the UK or you went to Asia. You travelled from
Yeah.
Australia to when you're a teenager, or a young adult.
Hmm.
Um, but I went back to the UK basically just to see where I'd come from.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd been in Australia 15 years at that point. But my parents followed me, and I said when my mum arrived there, she was blind, and my dad wasn't that well either.
Yeah.
So I stayed, and that's how I ended up staying so long in Scotland, really. And then the English thing happened. Um, Northern Ireland, and originally went to Northern Ireland in the 80s because they had it was the only music school that would take me because I was
Right.
30 then.
Yeah.
Um, I'm going all over the place here. No, I'm not doing
No,
that.
it's fascinating.
But anyway, yeah. So I went to Northern Ireland basically to go to the music school and
Yeah.
to have vocal training and piano training. But then I didn't actually keep up the piano. I took on a job, which I was okay, but a full time job and me didn't really go very well.
Yeah.
Um, um, but there I started singing as a resident singer in the Sunflower Folk Club in Belfast. And from there, I knew I did my first album, and I knew I wanted to do music full time. And even though I was pretty broke and pretty much in debt, the bank manager stuck by me and let me do it. um, and then somebody quite wisely said to me, it was actually Colin Sands said to me, I was recording in his studio. He said, if you're going to get anywhere as a woman in folk music back in the 80s, he said, you need to leave Northern Ireland. You need to go. So that's why I ended up back in Scotland at that point. Yeah. I went back to Northern Ireland to Rostrevor in 2018 or something like 18, I think, or around about then, something like that. I've been invited by Ben Sands to go and sing. Myself, Jasmine and I go and sing in Fiddler's Green Festival. So we went back and did that. Strangely enough, the whole time I was in Scotland, I seemed to be singing with Northern Ireland singers. Jasper was from Belfast. Kieran Doris, who I sang many years. I did a duo with him in the folk scene in the UK, up and down England and Scotland, but also I meant to work for about 30 years with that man in the Council for Music and Hospitals. We put us into nursing homes and hospitals. When I was off the road doing other stuff, we did that. I mean, I loved that work. I mean, that was just music for a completely different reason.
Yeah.
Okay, it was singing for the heart to a certain extent, but it was really, that was different. You sang to audiences where, we sang to audiences where we were watching the audience the whole time to see what song was working, especially in dementia units and Alzheimer's units, what was going to work, what was going to help them bring them through into, that was a whole different use of music. And I loved that work. I really did that for many years.
That's awesome.
Still do to a certain extent here in Northern Ireland, in Northern where I'm living now, New Zealand. So the New Zealand part, I'm still discovering why I came here, but I am here and I'm staying. I can't really afford to go anywhere else anyway now. I'm here and I'm 72 now. I'm not going anywhere else. I'm done. I'm settling, but and it's been good for me to be here.
Good.
I can be here as an Australian citizen. That's why I'm here. And I come here on tour a couple of times, and with Pauline from Came, and discovered the folk scene here, discovered people here. So cool. I came on here.
Awesome. And just to end on, really, it's kind of two questions in one. And one thing you mentioned already was your page with your poetry, but it's what's next for you and where can people follow you to stay up to date?
Okay. What's next for me? I'm singing in the local church here for communion. What else is next for me? I'm waiting to hear from Dale, who runs the 11th Folk Club. I suppose wherever I can get a folk club gig or a festival gig in New Zealand. I'm still got an agent in Australia, Val McGarry, who is looking into getting me some work in Australia, which is close enough to get to from here. There's my website, heatherinnes.com. I'll put things on there if I'm doing anything. There's nothing on there at the moment because I've just finished doing stuff. But and there's Facebook. If anybody's on Facebook, I've got a Facebook page as well as my profile, my ordinary page, and I've got Heather Gems, which is a group. And if you want to join that, just look it up and ask to join it. And that's all my poems.
Big thank you to Heather Innes for joining me. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and this is Heather Innes with Grandma's House.
Memories of Grandma's house when I was a child. Each summer we would visit there. Scotland to Yorkshire was such a long, long way, but I loved those times, I just didn't care. Gas mantles hissing on the walls, black leather vinyl on the chairs, Grandad's old piano with candlesticks for light, and the smell of bacon wafting up the stairs. We washed in the kitchen sink before breakfast each day. Once a week, a tin bath before the fire. The inside toilet was in Grandma's room. She locked her door at night when she retired. Gas mantles hissing on the walls, black leather vinyl on the chairs, Grandad's old piano with candlesticks for light, and the smell of bacon wafting up the stairs. I slept in Grandma's attic, 3 floors up those stairs, while the bust of Beethoven watched over me. A floral chamber pot was underneath my bed, 'cause Grandma took out her hearing aids, you see. Gas mantles hissing on the walls, black leather vinyl on the chairs, Granddad's old piano with candlesticks for light, and the smell of bacon wafting up the stairs. Sitting on her back step, looking at the view of distant Elsie Carr across the fields, Harold next door brought in his coal, his wife scrubbed their step upon her knees. Gas mantles hissing on the walls, black leather vinyl on the chairs, Granddad's old piano with candlesticks for light, and the smell of bacon wafting up the stairs. I walked with Grandma across those fields, picking wild flowers, climbing over stiles. Now new houses cover that ground, where we walked and talked for many, many miles. Gas mantles hissing on the walls, black leather vinyl on the chairs, Granddad's old piano with candlesticks for light, and the smell of bacon wafting up the stairs. Grandma is gone now to a graveyard nearby, but I visited Grandma's house the other day. Midst modern bungalows, it's still standing there, in a terraced row, refusing to go away. Gas mantles hissing on the walls, black leather vinyl on the chairs, Granddad's old piano with candlesticks for light, and the smell of bacon wafting up those stairs.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hold me, closely, hold me, closely. I'd like to show you what I'm hiding in my heart. This life is an echo chamber, tension will tear you apart. Need me, and believe me, it's easy to deceive me. And if you promise me you'll speak honestly, I'll follow you. I'd like to know you better, never gonna forget you, baby girl, baby girl.
will have no meaning if you don't wanna believe in the way I feel about you. It's got me reaching out to take your hand in my hand, squeeze until you understand that there's nothing more that I wanna say than to stay the way you are, my little baby girl, baby girl, baby girl, baby girl.
That was Baby Girl by myself, Dane Cobain, a new song. And before that we had Grandma's House by Heather Inners. You're listening to the Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. And it's time for us to go over to the Ilkshed now to catch up with Twangling Jack Ford for this week's album review.
The best of Steve Harley and Cockney Rebel. I think I bought this CD from Scorpion Records, which used to be next to a pizza shop called the Leaning Tower of Pizza, where Sainsbury's now is, in Wickham. The glam rock years were exciting and I was totally immersed. I bought Melody Maker, New Musical Express and Sounds every week, sometimes even Disc and Record Mirror. I took in all the publicity put out by the artists, and I was influenced by the would-be trendsetter build 'em up and knock 'em down journalists. When a band called Cockney Rebel announced their arrival with posters featuring a group of men looking like fantasy male escorts, the press were not kind. It looked like serious bandwagon jumping. Then the first single got played on the radio. It started with some Beethoven and not the rollover kind. It was laughably huge with strings and backing singers. The singing was a bit Dylan-esque, but with Anthony Newley Cockney overtones borrowed from Bowie, and the If I Was a Rich Man top hole Fiddler on the Roof Jewish scat vocal lines so often employed by Mark Bolan. It tried so hard that I felt it somehow deserved its subsequent lack of success. The song was Sebastian, and now I absolutely love it. They put out more singles. Mr. Soft and Judy Teen charted. Mr. Soft was very odd. It was a sort of Brecht-Weill cabaret oompa. It referenced musical cliches such as the entry of the Gladiators. I have never been much of a fan of Mr. Soft, but Judy Teen is a different matter. At the time I thought that by making a catchy song but hindering it by featuring not distorted guitar but pizzicato violins, indicated they had no idea what they were doing. But I am now amazed that they pulled it off. It was such an adventurous move. A friend of mine bought their second album, and by then the press was starting to warm to Steve Harley. The song Tumbling Down was gaining some acclaim. We would all sing along with the arms in the air refrain of "Oh, look what they've done to the blues." I also liked Love is a Prima Donna because at the age I was, it was. But everything he had done was overshadowed by the song that made his career. Come Up and See Me is one of the great pop singles of all time. Brilliantly catchy, with the best acoustic guitar solo known to man, and a gap you could get a bus through. It was the song that was played in his honour when he died recently. It is still played on the radio and by covers bands and solo acts. He never made another, but to have made one was probably enough. He later had a hit with an unnecessary version of Here Comes the Sun. I preferred the Beatles version, but they never released it as a single, so it was nice to hear it on Wonderful Radio 1. He also had a hit with a song from Phantom of the Opera, but he did not get the part. Instead it went to Michael Crawford. The best of Steve Harley and Cockney Rebel.
Big thank you to Twangling Jack Ford for this week's album review. Thank you to Heather Inners for being this week's guest. Thank you to everyone whose music I've shared. As always, you can find us on Facebook. If you search for The Art Show on Wickham Sound, you should be able to find us. We are repeated on Wickham Sound on Monday nights. We're on the Wickham Sound Listen Again, iTunes, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please do leave us a short review on your podcast platform of choice. And if you want to reach out to me, you can drop me an email on dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. So I'm going to leave you with one last tune, and this is Mirrors by Tony Goff. I'll catch you next week.
I tell people look on the bright side while I'm sat in the dark. I tell people to be strong even when times are hard. I bury myself, I wanna submerge. I'm dishing out advice while I'm sat out on the curb. I bury myself, I wanna submerge. Whoa, it's my time to look in the mirror and to change my errant ways. It's time that I fix relationships over time that I've prayed. It's time to enjoy life again. It's time to let you in. It's time that I should be happy. It's time to love again. It's my book and it's my story. It's my time and it's my glory. The future is for the taking. It's in the palm of your hands, and only you can find it in these derelict lands. Oh, it's my time to look in the mirror and to change my errant ways. It's time that I fix relationships over time that I've prayed. It's time to enjoy life again. It's time to let you in. It's time that I should be happy. It's time to love again. 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 It's my time to look in the mirror and to change my errant ways. It's time that I fix relationships over time that I've frayed. It's time to enjoy life again. It's time to let you in. It's time that I should be happy. It's time to love again.